Michael Jones is the founder and director of the nonprofit organization Inspiring Philosophy and is primarily dedicated to research in the fields of philosophy, history, and science to uncover deep philosophical questions relating to the universe and our individual perception of life. He has a master's in philosophy from the University of Arizona and has published a plethora of research work on his YouTube channel, Inspiring Philosophy. If you're not aware of his channel, I encourage you to follow him. On this channel, he compiles and analyzes data for the layman to reach reasonable conclusions to a variety of philosophical quandaries. Some of his most notable work includes his presented research on quantum mechanics and how it points to a theistic worldview, a video series on Genesis 1 through 11, a defense of the resurrection of Jesus, and videos addressing the problem of evil and hell. All right. So I want to say, first of all, thank you, Brother Jones, for coming to minister to us. I'm telling you guys right now, you're going to be blessed today. If you pushed your way out, you are going to learn something. You are going to be challenged. You're going to be made the better. Amen. Now, I want you to understand that Michael Jones is a young man. He's a young brother, young, but passionate about Christ. And I want those of you who are young to remember that you are a vessel that God wants to use. Let him and others that we bring here be an inspiration to you, that you can grow in your knowledge, your faith can increase, your relationship with God, as you steward it, will become stronger, and you can be prepared to give an answer for the hope that lies within you. I don't think I need to remind you guys that you are blessed to be a part of a church that values apologetics. You please understand this if you don't. And if you're new to apologetics, prayerfully you will immerse yourself more in this discipline, this calling that God has for you, and you will be a more sharpened vessel. Unlike many of the speakers I've brought, I have not had a previous relationship with Michael Jones, but I'm very aware of who he is. And I first became aware of him through his YouTube channel called Inspiring Philosophy. Because every year I would get questions from people about, should we really be celebrating Easter? Should we really celebrate Christmas? I had a position on that. Yes, as Christians, those are Christian holidays. I know this is controversial to some people, but his YouTube channel was a valuable resource. I want you to understand that Michael Jones knows how to research. He knows how to find facts. And we want to encourage you to distinguish between factual information and sensational information. Information that's based on people's experience versus scripture and history. That's what you want to learn to do, is to distinguish between those two. So Michael Jones started his YouTube channel in 2011. I asked him a question when we had dinner. I said, so what led to you starting a YouTube channel? And he just explained how he had finished college and he was working a security job. And he had a lot of time on his hand while he was working. He thought to himself, you know what? Nobody's really putting this content out there. I should probably use YouTube. And his channel grew and he grew and he grew. He said lots of people will ask him sometimes, what's the secret? He said, just following God. There is no secret. I just put the content out there, and whatever God does with it, he does with it. So we've invited him to come speak, again, on Trick or Truth, Debunking the Myths About Halloween. The reason why we came up with this talk title is because there are lots of myths concerning Halloween. This is perhaps the most controversial holiday that Christians wrestle with. But we want you to leave here full of knowledge. So I hope you have a pen and a pad or some electronic device to take notes on. If you don't have that, store it in your memory. There will be an opportunity to ask questions before you leave today. Lastly, he's going to speak for about an hour. It may be a little short of an hour. After he's done speaking, if there's time, we're going to allow you to ask some questions. If there's not time and we need to go directly to our intermission, you will be able to ask questions during the Part B session. Amen? Okay, there are refreshments for you in the social hall. We have tables set up in the lobbies. You can use the restroom during intermission or whenever you like. Michael Jones, please come. Help me welcome him with a warm round of applause.
Thank you, appreciate that. All right, welcome everyone. I hope everyone's up and cheerful this morning. I have a bold claim to make. Halloween is not pagan. How many of you are convinced Halloween is not pagan? See, a couple of hands. I hope by the end everyone is convinced that Halloween is not pagan. Now, you might be asking yourself, how could Halloween not be pagan? I see it every year. It's ghouls and goblins and a celebration of death. That sounds pagan to me. Well, you might be surprised to find out that we have conceded this day to the forces of the devil, basically. This is originally a Christian holiday, and it's time for a reconquista. Okay? So let's get into this. But before we get into this, I'm told every year that Halloween is evil and pagan. We must stay away from it because it is one of the worst holidays ever. And I'm told this often by legalists and fundamentalists. And I think they discovered a missing verse, actually. You all know Luke 10. It says, "And he said to them, I saw Satan fall like lightning from heaven. Behold, I've given you authority to tread on serpents and scorpions and over the power of the enemy. And nothing shall hurt you." You all know this verse. It's a really good verse. But did you know fundamentalists have discovered a missing section of this verse hidden deep in the Vatican archives? Originally, they'll tell you that it also used to include, except every October 31st when Satan will be unstoppable. Okay? And he will unleash his dark plan of bad dental hygiene upon any who dare to eat candy. Therefore, lock yourself inside on that day and do not do anything that might be construed as fun. Legalist Standard Version 2025. Now, we all know that's nonsense. That was never in the original, but it seems the way a lot of people around Halloween tend to think that way. We're told we have the authority to tread over all the powers of the enemy. But for some reason, every October 31st, people are like, well, I can't do it this day for some reason. Satan now has all the power. That's odd. In my Bible, I remember reading that we have the Spirit of God and he dwells in us. You think Satan is scared of the Spirit of God? Okay. Why would he not be scared of the Spirit of God on October 31st? It doesn't make any sense. Again, what are we told in Hebrews 2? I think Hebrews is a very underrated book of the Bible. It's a very, very powerful book. But he says that Jesus destroyed the one who has power over death, that is the devil. He has no power whatsoever. But again, every Halloween, Christians turn into this, worried that the devil is hiding in every piece of candy corn and he's going to get you. Now, we all know that is nonsense. So where does this cognitive dissonance come from? Why are Christians so scared of the devil and his minions on October 31st? But 364 days of the year, we know we have the power to tread over all the powers of the enemy. Well, let's go to a little bit of history. So what does Halloween mean? Okay? Halloween just means All Hallows Eve. Now, what does hallow mean? Hallow just means honor as holy. That's what it means. It means basically All Holy Eve, in a sense. So, and of course, we know this is in the Bible. You are called to be hallowed. You shall be holy as I am holy, 1 Peter says. Now, why is it called All Hallows Eve? It was because over 1,000 years ago, the church decided they're going to have a day to honor all the saints. And it became November 1st, All Saints' Day. This came because people wanted to honor St. Paul, St. John, St. Stephen, saints from the Bible. But over time, that got a little crazy because there were so many saints. You had saints in the early church, people that were martyred by pagan Roman emperors, like Saint Sebastian. And so there were so many saints, they just said, well, we'll just honor them all on All Saints' Day. Now, who are saints according to the Bible, though? This is important. You. You're all saints. Okay? When we see in Scripture, we see that over and over again, all Christians are called saints. Now, when you hear the word saints, people go, well, that's too Catholic. But that's saints with a capital S. With a lowercase s, we are all saints. And it's good to remember and honor the men and women who came before us, who fought for the faith. It's not too bad. How many of you enjoy celebrating Martin Luther King Day? Exactly. Why? Because he was a good man who fought for civil rights. We have a day to honor him. Why would we not have a day, likewise, to honor all the saints who fought and defended the faith and carried it on? Okay? I think, for one thing, it's great to have a day where we remember Saint Stephen from the book of Acts, who was the first martyr for the church, or Saint Paul, who was also martyred, or Saint Peter. I think it's good to remember and teach our children about these great men and women. That was the purpose of All Saints' Day. And so October 31st naturally became the eve of All Saints' Day, All Hallows' Eve. That's where it comes from. Case closed, right? All right, we can move on. Done. All right, you guys, thanks for coming. Okay. No, because the fundamentalist strikes back and says, but have you ever heard of Samhain? No, that's not how you say it. This is called Samhain. Now, why is it pronounced that way? Blame the Irish. Okay. I think they were so mad at the British that they just spelled everything weird. So when they were forced to speak English, they just started spelling stuff weird to really mess with us. So this is called Samhain, not Samhain. I know, I'm annoyed too. Blame my ancestors. We're told this is an ancient Celtic festival that Halloween was based on. Okay? We are told all sorts of crazy things about this day, that they used to dress in costumes, that they used to leave out treats on their doorsteps to lure away evil spirits. I'm here to tell you that's all nonsense. None of that is true. I guarantee if you've heard about Samhain, anyone heard about Samhain? Yeah. I guarantee 90% of what you've heard about Samhain is false. Everything you've heard about is false. So, first off, let's just do a quick analogy. So, think about this. The church had spread around the world. It was in Ethiopia. It was in Persia. It's in Rome. It's in North Africa. And then it started spreading up to Ireland. Very small region of how far Christianity has spread. Let's say we as Americans decided we wanted to incorporate Greenland into the U.S. But we got there and we found, well, guys, the Inuit have a holiday up there, okay? And they would really, really like to become part of the U.S., but they're upset because they think they got to give up their holidays. And they have this really, really important holiday on February 12th. Why don't we move Christmas to February 12th to incorporate them in the U.S.? Who would agree with that? You're right. It sounds silly. It sounds ridiculous. That's how ridiculous it would have sounded to them if someone from Ireland would have went to Rome or to Greece and said, guys, the Celts up there really have a fun holiday called Samhain. We need to move our holiday of All Saints' Day to that day to make them feel happy and special. No one would have done such a ridiculous thing. So the idea that Halloween comes from Samhain is absurd. It's not actually how it follows. And we know this when we start looking at historical records. So this is a document from Ireland. It dates to about the 9th century AD. So you're talking about like pretty far back. Okay? And this is in Celtic regions, and they're mentioning that they're celebrating All Saints' Day on April 20th. See, originally, All Saints' Day was on different days throughout the ancient Christian world. Some people celebrated in May, some celebrated in April. No one had a general thing. And then one day in Germanic regions, they decided we're going to celebrate All Saints' Day on November 1st. The Bishop of Rome liked that because that's what he was called at the time, the Bishop of Rome. And he said, hey, I think everyone should do this. And then it spread to Celtic regions. So nobody placed All Saints' Day and therefore All Hallows' Eve on October 31st and November 1st because of Samhain. That doesn't make any sense because in that region, All Saints' Day for them was on April 20th. And then later, when it started becoming more customary in Germanic, English, Italian regions, then the Celtic, the Irish regions followed suit and then moved it to that day much later. Now, what do we know about Samhain? Was it a dark, evil, pagan holiday filled with rituals and darkness and costumes and candy? No. Samhain basically means summer's end. It was a summer's end festival. Here's the earliest document we have that talks about how they would celebrate Samhain. And this comes from the 10th century, so about 1,000 years ago. They say every year, the men of Ulster were accustomed to hold festival together. And the time when they held it was for 3 days before Samhain, the summer's end. And for 3 days after that, and upon Samhain itself, so about a week. And that it is spoken of it that when the men of Ulster were in the plain, that they used to keep that festival every year, nor was there a thing in the world that they would do except sports and marketing and splendors and pomps and feasting and eating. And it is from that custom of theirs that the festival of Samhain has descended. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't hear a lot about pagan rituals in there, unless there's something that has to do with pomps. It sounds like a British thing. But for the most part, I don't see any mention of pagan rituals, human sacrifice, dark spirits. It just seemed like it was a summer's end party they would do, doesn't it? And that makes sense because in the ancient world of the cold north, a lot of your animals would die during winter. So what do you do when it starts getting cold? Well, you kill a bunch, you have a big party, and then you don't have to care for these animals throughout winter, and you get a good big feast. It's generally what would happen in a lot of the world. So as winter's coming on, a lot of ancient people would kill some of their animals, have a big feast, bring on winter, and then there's less livestock to care for as they go through the winter months. Samhain seems to have been one of those celebrations. But notice no mention of dark spirits, no mention of witchcraft, anything like that. Here's the earliest source, this is the 12th century, so 200 years later, that mentions any sort of weird supernatural aspect associated with Samhain. So basically it says the men of Ireland were at a feud about a maiden, okay? One man after another went to woo her. Every year on Samhain, the wooing used to take place, for the fairy mounds of Ireland were always open about Samhain. So in the 12th century, there was a weird belief that the fairy world, the realm between the fairy world and the real world was slightly thinner, and fairy creatures might come through. How many of you have ever participated in a fairy wooing around Halloween? Congratulations, you did it. You avoided any pagan custom that could be associated with Halloween. Congratulations. Excellent. So no fairy wooing, okay? I want to be clear about that. None of that should be happening around Halloween. But as you see, nothing we do today associated with modern Halloween goes back to Samhain, at least that we're aware of. Nothing. So this idea that dressing in costumes, collecting candy, bobbing for apples, none of that goes back to a pagan custom. When you've been told all of this goes back to Samhain, you've been lied to. None of it actually is. In the centuries after this, a lot of Christian authors got spooked and they started making up things about Samhain. They said, well, human sacrifices happened on that time. Well, they used to be scared of spirits, and so they would hide or dress in costumes to confuse them. This was made up centuries later. We have no historical documentation to support that. Halloween is entirely Christian in origin. Sure, it happened around the same time as Samhain, but that's a coincidence. Okay? Did you know that Valentine's Day is on February 14th? The Romans had a holiday named Lupercalia on February 15th. Who cares? That doesn't mean Valentine's Day comes from Lupercalia. Okay? The Romans had a holiday called Saturnalia on December 17th. It's pretty close to Christmas, right? Who cares? There's no relation between Saturnalia and Christmas. Same thing. None of our modern holidays trace back to paganism. Especially Halloween, Christmas, Easter, Valentine's Day. None of them do. So when we actually look at what historians have to say, they'll say there is in fact no hard evidence that Samhain was specifically devoted to the dead or to ancestor worship, despite claims to the contrary by some American folklorists, some of whom have presumed that the feast was devoted to Samhain, god of the dead. No evidence of that. Well, you don't believe him? Let's ask another historian. Ronald Hutton says it must be concluded, therefore, that the medieval record furnished no evidence that November 1st was a major pan-Celtic festival, and none of the religious ceremonies even where it was observed. Now, Ronald Hutton's an interesting character because he's not a Christian. He's actually like a British pagan kind of person. He was tasked with his society to find aspects of ancient pagan rituals and modern customs and holidays. And so he wrote this book, basically concluding, there's not a lot, if any. All these modern holidays are Christian in origin. Sorry, guys, we cannot find any evidence of ancient Druid, Celtic, pagan festivals that we can rebuild some sort of pagan religion out of. Another historian, or two historians here, they say certainly Samhain was a time for festival gatherings. And medieval Irish texts and later Irish, Welsh, and Scottish folklore use it as a setting for supernatural encounters. But there is no evidence that it was connected with the dead in pre-Christian times or that pagan religious ceremonies were held. Again, all these myths you've heard about Samhain come from a much later time. They don't go back to the ancient Celtic festival of Samhain. It's all a myth. So you guys are safe. You're not participating in pagan rituals on Halloween if you hand out candy or anything like that. And even if it did, you're still not participating in pagan rituals. Okay? You have to actively participate in a pagan ritual. You can't accidentally do that. I've not heard of any Christian that's been walking down the street and they trip and the next thing they know they fall into a black hood and they're around a bonfire and there's a goat being sacrificed. Okay, that's not how it works. You can't accidentally participate in a pagan ritual. You have to want to. You have to actively go and do it. So if a pagan in the past, decorated a pine tree, that doesn't mean you're participating in a pagan ritual on December 25th when you decorate a pine tree. Just because an ancient pagan may have handed out food, just if you hand out candy on Halloween, that doesn't mean you're doing it for their gods. That would be absurd. So, everybody just relax, take a step and think about what's happening here. Pagans used to eat food as part of their rituals. That doesn't mean if you eat food, you're participating in a pagan ritual. Let's use some, common sense. Sounds like a good idea. So where does modern Halloween come from? Where does all this stuff come from? Well, you might be surprised to find out European folk traditions. That's it. Pretty simple. These things happen over the year. Okay? How many of you have heard of the Christmas tradition of placing an elf on the shelf? Yeah. How many of you heard of it in the 90s? Exactly. It didn't exist. It's a weird new custom associated with Christmas that just came about over the past 15 years or so. Did it come from a pagan ritual? No, it came from an American folk tradition. People are capable of developing folk traditions without it being traced back to paganism. So, decorating Christmas trees. Doesn't go back to paganism. European folk tradition. Hiding Easter eggs. Doesn't go back to paganism. European folk tradition. Okay? How many of you have set off fireworks on the 4th of July? How many of you have worried you're celebrating an ancient Native American god of fire? Right, that would be silly. Likewise, that's just a folk tradition that came about over time. So, where do they come from? Again, in the Dictionary of English Folklore, they say in England, since the 19th century and increasingly the 20th century, Halloween has acquired a reputation as a night on which ghosts, witches, and fairies are especially active. Why this should be is debatable. So we don't entirely know. Now, it doesn't take a lot of speculation to sort of look into this. So remember, Halloween is the eve of what? All Saints' Day, correct. You are honoring saints that are now dead. So eventually it's just going to become a holiday associated with the dead. And what are we associated with dead? Ghosts, witches, fairies, etc., etc., etc. This is a great book by Nicholas Rogers. He notes modern Halloween customs are very recent creations. They come from European and Christian folk traditions, and modern trick-or-treating is really only about 100 years old or so. Now, it comes from medieval precursors, which I'm going to get into here. But, again, it's a very modern idea. The very modern aspect comes from very recent traditions that have developed. So he says in his book, this is a good quote, "It became customary in many towns and villages for the rich parishioners to offer doles to the poor during Hallowtide in return for prayers to the dead, emulating the medieval custom of the well-to-do, who left small bequeaths for this purpose to parishioners and chanters. The spectacle of the poor receiving food for prayers at Hallowtide was well established by Shakespeare's day." So trick-or-treating seems to trace back to a tradition where the rich would give the poor food. Now, does that sound Christian? Yeah. It doesn't sound anything like a pagan tradition. Why are we worried about trick-or-treating? It dates back to a Christian idea. He also says the custom of baking bread or soul cakes was well established before the Reformation. This food was conventionally distributed to all relatives and poor neighbors who offered to pray for the souls in purgatory, underscoring the belief that prayers and ritual practices could smooth or speed a soul's passage to heaven. Now, we don't have to do that part, okay? You don't believe in purgatory? Okay, no problem. But notice just the simple custom of baking bread or soul cakes was a common tradition to give to the poor in return for prayers. Now, of course, we can reject the latter part. Okay? If you don't believe in purgatory, that's fine. This is the Protestant church. It makes total sense. That doesn't mean we throw the baby out with the bathwater. Very important. So, trick-or-treating does not come from anything pagan. It comes from European Christian traditions of baking food to give to the poor. In Ireland, costumes were sometimes associated with the people who went about before nightfall collecting for the feast. Use in one district of County Cork brought the Lebain, or white mare, a man covered in white sheets holding a wooden horse's head like some of the midwinter mock beasts known in England. So where does costumes come from? Again, just European folk traditions started to become associated with the collecting of food or the soul cakes on the holiday. So modern customs, modern Halloween traditions just go back to medieval Christian and European folk traditions. What happened is in America about 100 to 200 years ago, kids would get a little rowdy on holidays, like Christmas, like Halloween. And so they go around and they would destroy property. Many towns in America were like, we got to stop this. So they started creating Halloween parties. Or towns started to say, hey, why don't you do trick-or-treating, descending from this medieval custom of getting soul cakes. And of course, they dress in costumes. So modern Halloween traditions were a way to deter young people from vandalizing and committing crimes. This all sounds really good, doesn't it? giving food to the poor, dressing in innocent costumes, deterring kids from committing crimes. Why are we afraid of Halloween? There's no reason for it. So everything you see, modern customs associated with Halloween, pretty recent, come from medieval customs during the Renaissance, that kind of stuff. Nothing goes back to paganism as far as we can tell. Now, maybe there's some lost ancient document somewhere that will connect it, but as far as I'm aware, historians have yielded none of that. But wait, the fundamentalists will tell us, did you not know that the founder of the Church of Satan said, I'm glad that Christian parents let their children worship the devil at least one night out of the year. And every Halloween, this quote is brought up by Anton LaVey to show us, you see, this is evil, we need to avoid it, the Satanists know, therefore we cannot be celebrating Halloween. It's always funny to me that everyone knows the devil is a liar until we start talking about Halloween. Even if he said this, he's wrong. I mean, it doesn't mean anything to me. He's the founder of the Church of Satan. I'm going to be very skeptical of anything he says. No, if he starts telling me things like, did you know that Jesus was a Satanist? Well, I don't believe that. I mean, you're obviously a liar. But there's also a big problem with this quote. It's fake. He never said that. Yeah, it's invented up by fundamentalist Christians to try to scare you. Yeah, he never said it. Anytime this quote is brought up, I go, okay, source. Where did he say it? When did he say it? How did he say it? Who was there when he said it? Is it in a book? Is it in a press release? No, nothing. They can't have nothing. Even the Church of Satan comes out and says, he never said this. I don't know what you Christians are doing. You made this up. Do you think they'd want to take credit for that? They're like, no, we're not even doing that. This is ridiculous, guys. So, no evidence in any documentation he said this. But wait, the holidays of the Satanic temple include Halloween. Checkmate, right? Well, also, they have a holiday on December 25th. Who's ready to give up Christmas now? Let's throw it out, ladies and gentlemen. The Satanists claimed it. That's game over. We're not allowed to use it anymore. I'm sorry, I thought I worshiped a God who owned 365 days out of the year. I don't really care what the Satanists do. I don't really care how many goats they sacrifice. Okay? I'm still going to celebrate when I want, how I want, because they have no power. They worship themselves, because really Satanists are just atheists with spice, okay? They don't actually believe in Satan. They're just political activists with spice. But it doesn't matter what they do on these days. It's not their days. If they just decide to start, celebrating an annual goat sacrifice on your birthday, are you now going to stop celebrating your birthday? That would be kind of weird. Okay, you don't have to worry about what they do. So, again, nobody should care what Satanists do. Okay, they have no power over God. They have no power over us. They have no power over the Holy Spirit. Everybody calm down. It's going to be okay. I don't really care what they do. Okay, so keep that in mind. So what should we do? Well, I would say the first thing we should do is we should stop hiding. Okay? This should not be us every October 31st. This is a holiday with the perfect opportunity to serve the community. Are we not called to serve our communities? So get out and serve your community. Okay? There are plenty of children going around, and it is the perfect opportunity to spread love, to show grace, to show that we are not a community of believers that are terrified. Okay? We should be doing everything we can to make this holiday as Christian as possible, not giving it over to the devil. Okay? The reason why it has become a holiday of death and ghoul is because we have given it to them. Satan has no power unless we give it to him. True, today Halloween has become a holiday that celebrates death and horror and blood and ghoul. Reconquista. All right, let's take it over. Let's turn it back into a holiday that is godly, that actually honors our saints, that honors God. So that's the first thing we should do. Second thing to keep in mind is personal convictions are not church-wide convictions. Some of you may have a personal conviction to not celebrate Halloween. Fine, don't. Notice that is a personal conviction. That's why it was given to you, and it was not put in the Bible. Okay? Because of that, you can keep your personal convictions, but don't try to go around like a Pharisee going, well, if you don't do everything I do, you're not really as holy as I am, and that's not that good. That's a complete nonsense. So avoid that kind of stuff. Another thing we should be doing is remembering the saints. Okay? How many of you enjoy reading St. Paul? Letters of Peter. Wouldn't it be great to have a day where we just honor them? We don't have to pray to them. No one here is Catholic. That's fine. Okay? You don't have to like worship them or anything like that. We just remember and honor them. I've met some Christians that every All Saints Day, they teach their kid on that day about a saint. They teach them about a saint you may not have heard of, like Saint Sebastian, who served under an emperor, Diocletian, and he was shot up with arrows and left to die. Then a Christian woman found him, healed him, and instead of fleeing, he went back to the emperor to preach the gospel, and they killed him. Yeah. Wouldn't it be cool to learn about him instead of learning about ghouls and goblins on this day? How about St. Stephen? Again, first martyr for the church. These kinds of people were great men and women, and we should be honoring them. No? It's not Catholic to honor the saints. It's Christian to honor the saints. So remember, St. Stephen, remember these people. They're very, very important. The other thing that you should do is you should serve your community. This is the perfect day to do it. People are coming to your door, and you have the gospel. How are you not using this day to your advantage? Every Christian should be like, wait, the people are coming to my door? How am I not going to use this to somehow serve the community? That's exactly what we should be doing. If someone comes to your door dressed as something evil, okay, you can still love on them. Okay, you can still give them candy. Okay, that's fine. I would say don't let your kids dress up that way. But there's nothing wrong with sending your kid dressed out as a princess or as Iron Man. The devil's not going to possess them. Okay, that's not how it works. I once heard a crazy Christian pastor say that when you put on a costume, you're taking on a new identity, and then you're therefore becoming that thing. Well, don't ever give hand-me-down clothes to anybody because they're going to steal your identity. We can't have that. And this is terrifying. When I was in 9th grade, the devil tried to turn me into an Oompa Loompa when I participated in the Willy Wonka play, apparently. It's insanity what people believe about Halloween. It's like common sense goes right out the window. But this should be a day we should be using to serve our community, if anything. And most of all, we need to try to reclaim this holiday for Christ because it's become too modern. It's become too secular. And the reason it has is our fault as the church. We let them do it. So it's time to take it back. Same with Christmas. Christmas has become too materialistic. Take it back. Turn it back into a holiday that's all about Jesus. Same with Halloween. So I want to remind you, what does the Bible say? It says we have authority to tread on serpents and scorpions and over all the power of the enemy. Nothing shall hurt you. So when you go out and you hand out candy, when you're serving your community, you will not be possessed by demons for doing so. You will be fine. This should be your mentality every single Halloween. This is what you're going to do. You're going to tread on the devil. So get out there and do that. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate you all coming out.
You made it to the end of this video, which means this message matters to you. If you want to see more content like this reaching people for Christ, you can help make it happen. Your support makes these videos possible. Click the link below and donate today. And if you want to go even deeper, consider joining our Patreon community. You'll get early access to videos, behind-the-scenes content, and a place to connect with others passionate about this mission.